I'm Jed Lyons, the faculty director of the center, and my job today is going to be to start the meeting, keep it going, and then end the meeting. Okay? So I appreciate you all coming here. We're very happy that the Vice Provost for Faculty Development, Dr. Christine Curtis, has agreed to provide some opening remarks and introduce our speaker today. So Dr. Curtis, if you would join me at the podium, please.
Good morning. It's great to be here this morning, and we welcome all of you to the Fall 2007 Colloquium for the Center for Teaching Excellence. The topic for today, as I understand it, is lifelong learning and information literacy. And Jed provided me some ideas from his perspective, and I'm going to use them, don't worry. But I also was thinking about lifelong learning and kind of went back in time. It's always fun, you know, to reminisce. And thinking, well, if I had been a 1987 graduate, what changes occurred in the 20 years from then to now? And if I had been a 1987 graduate and hadn't continued to learn, I'd be totally obsolete. I wouldn't know how to use a cell phone. I wouldn't know how to use a computer. I surely couldn't attach an attachment, and so on and so forth. And if we think about all of our knowledge, we, the scholars and all the researchers in the research laboratories and all the entrepreneurs, we've been pushing back knowledge. We've been pushing back the frontiers of knowledge, and we have been, the amount of discovery, the amount of problem solving that we have done has been tremendous. And if you really start thinking about it, you can say, wow, I only know a tiny bit. And then as we progress in, each day brings new challenges, we have to constantly learn. And if I had been a graduate in 1987, I don't think I would have realized that. So in thinking about it, it's our responsibility as the faculty to lay the foundations for the students so that they do what they need to do as they go through life and in their careers. And maybe when they reach my age, they would realize what you had done for them. But I'm pretty sure early on they would not realize it. They would do it intuitively because we have taught them to do it. So that kind of brings us into our curriculum. You know, if we all face, okay, we're pushing the frontiers back. There is so much to teach. What do we teach? And where do we set the stage for the student, whom we hope will graduate in 4 to 6 years, what the student will learn on his or her own? And that is a constant question, and I'm sure as long as there are universities, as long as there's curriculum, the faculty will be asking that question. We're asking it right now in our general education. Provost Becker in 2005 set up the general education focus groups. We're making the shift from course-based general education to learning outcomes. Basically, again, asking the questions, what do the students really need to know, and what foundation do we need to provide them so that they can continue their learning when they need to do that. So we have many tools at our disposal. We have the classroom, we have our laboratories, we have our studios, we have our field experiences. We're expanding in undergraduate research. Some of our students get to do study abroad. Some of our students do campus exchanges. And some of our students are involved in service learning. So we have a lot of different ways that we can reach our students and give them the opportunity to develop the skills, learn what they need to learn in our disciplines as well as in the broader scope in general education. We need to engage them in inquiry. We need to make sure that they ask the right questions, or at least reasonable questions. And we need to make sure that they know how to find the information. We need to be concerned that they do find the valid information and that they are information literate so that they can get the information that is valid and then make reasonable and analysis of that information and then be able to incorporate it. Now, information literacy is a key thing that's going to be discussed today. Our speaker today addresses information literacy in her book, and the book is entitled Higher Education in the Internet Age, Libraries Creating a Strategic Edge. She writes, if students finish their education thinking that they can find all the information they need through a fast Google search and the libraries are useful only for classroom assignments and recreational reading, they are not information literate. How many times have I heard complaints from my fellow faculty members, and I've done the same, is they can Google about anything, they can do a lot of things on Facebook and many other places, but why can't they find the information they need to do this assignment? And so it's our responsibility, I believe, to teach that. Well, I'll just speak from personal experience. I won't bore you with it, but just to say that I had the opportunity to teach junior level chemical engineering thermodynamics, and I just even couldn't get through the syllabus. How was I supposed to do information literacy? I mean, and I don't have the question to that. That's why I'm staying for the talk. I have a lot of questions that, I know there's a better way to teach thermodynamics than what I was doing. So I'll be participating in the Center for Teaching Excellence seminars this year and in the future to see if I can ever find the answer to that question. So today's colloquium is designed to do two things. First, it's to help us learn how to integrate information literacy into our teaching. And secondly, to stimulate us to discuss more broadly about our general education curriculum. What are the outcomes that we want to have? Where do we want to position our students for the future? During our speaker's talk, I need part of your brain, you need to multitask here, part of the brain to be thinking about the 4 questions that we're going to be discussing afterwards so that you can kind of think the questions and then get the answers and start assimilating and coming up with your own thoughts. The questions are, and I'm paraphrasing here, what information literacy and critical thinking skills are needed for our students to be successful? How can the faculty, how can we help our students develop information literacy and critical thinking skills to prepare them for their careers, to prepare them for lifelong learning, to make them educated citizens? What are the barriers that the students have in lifelong learning, and how can we overcome those barriers? Our speaker today, who is going to help us think through these issues, is Dr. Patricia Breivik, and she's uniquely qualified to engage us in this discussion. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Brooklyn College, a Master's in Library Science from Pratt Institute, a doctorate in Library Science from Columbia University. She's served as dean at 2 institutions and has done just exciting things there. She was the dean at Wayne State University. She was in charge of 4 research libraries. She was in charge of the Graduate School for Library and Information Science. She was in charge of the University Press. And she also was in charge of a Faculty Development Center. She was talking about that a moment ago, and I've asked her if I can talk with her later and learn more about what she did because she was very successful. Okay, she was also the dean at the University of San Jose State University as dean of the university library, and she was involved in a project to develop a new library with the public library system. It was approximately a $180 million project, and it was very successful. The library has won a number of awards. In addition, she served us all at the national level. She served as the past president of the Association of Colleges and Research Libraries. She has also served for 16 or 17 years as the chair of the National Forum on Information Literacy, which is a group of organizations, 90 strong, that are concerned about how people learn, how they gain information, and how they use that information. After 33 years in higher ed, Dr. Breivik is now a vice president of Nehemiah Communications, and it provides support services for small to medium businesses and nonprofit organizations. And she resides here in Columbia with us. And so she frequently talks about information literacy and helps people understand what the issues are and how we can develop in our students information literacy. So please join with me to welcome Dr. Patricia Breivik as our colloquium speaker. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here. This is a very busy time of the year. I was utterly delighted at the widespread of disciplines that we have represented here. I've even heard that we had people that traveled in from other campuses. If you're from another campus, well, a special welcome to all of you for being here. I understand that some of you will have to leave later this morning or around lunchtime because you want to teach students. That seems like a very reasonable reason to be excused, and I will give you a challenge before you leave, though, so that you don't go away empty. Let me tell you the two things that I'm hoping we will accomplish here today. Well, actually, maybe three. One, that we have a shared vision for what information literacy is. Secondly, that we understand its great importance for our students, both as students, but also for the rest of their life. And three, I hope you will go away with a commitment, or a renewed commitment, if you already came with one, to making this happen here in this university. I would like to start by asking you all, you have pens and pencils out, I see, would you please just take a moment and write down how you would define information literacy. Okay, one of the things we'll want to do is have you look at that at the end of the morning and see if you would make any changes in that. Our framework is going to be two parts. I want to talk to you some about the importance of information literacy, why it is essential for your students, why it's worth that extra effort, and place it in the larger environment of what's going on with things like student learning outcomes and other efforts. And then secondly, the second part is going to get really practical, because I know how hard you all work. And if I can't give you something practical to walk away with that will allow you to do something different, probably it won't happen. And so we'll deal with a larger picture for a while, and then we're going to get real practical. Okay, I'm going to start you with a video. All right, this is a video that was done by UCLA Pac Bell. It is a few years old now, and that means that every statistic that you hear about amount of information or the number of web pages and things, you just multiply by hundreds or thousands or something like that. But back when this videotape was made, it was still so overwhelming that you'll get the sense of how we feel about it. And what I want you to do, having just written your own definition of information literacy, look for the definition that comes across in this. Unless you think it's going to be a dull educational video, I will tell you that the man who produced Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, if you remember that movie, was the producer for this. So we can hit.
What is information literacy? You know, I'm not exactly sure.
How much you know about information?
Information literacy would be literacy, information.
Not just the printed word anymore.
Interact with the technology.
Like the internet and things like that.
For the ability of people to get information from different sources, whether it's
Something of an
I
overload.
get my information from the library, from the computers, from my boss.
You can get information almost any and everywhere. You can look outside at the sky and get information.
The miracle of the human animal is the ability to extract highly complex information from anything our five senses can relay to our brains. Never before in human history has so much information been pushed at us. Never before in human history has so much information been available in storage, not just to the elite few, but to anyone who is able to access it. We're living in a time when the total amount of human knowledge is increasing exponentially. Information is being developed, assimilated, reshaped, and redistributed at a rate unimaginable even a generation ago. Say you were living in 1400. Well, you could probably get along pretty well in 1500 with the same information you had in 1400. Not a whole lot changed for the average Joe. But a person living in 1900 would hardly recognize anything today.
Stock is up 54% in the quarter. The stock down today as Singapore Airlines.
Sitting up on South 57 transition to the westbound side of the 91. You get traffic every time.
Every year there are 60,000 books published in the U.S. alone.
This is big stuff.
Last year there were 6,000 pieces of new legislation. There are 2.1 billion web pages. There are 7 million new web pages every day.
Anybody who has access to a computer and a connection can, have input into the great dialogue. Anybody.
Half of all service workers are involved in gathering, analyzing, synthesizing, structuring, storing, and/or retrieving information.
The amount kids have to know in school today is phenomenal.
Like going into a library anymore isn't just going in and picking up a book. Going into a library now is, is the ability to go anywhere in the world with the one touch of a finger on a computer.
The Internet Archive contains collected information for historians, researchers, scholars, and at this time it contains about 14 terabytes of data. That's equal to about 1 billion pages of text. That is doubling every 6 months.
A mouse, a keyboard. If you're not using a computer, you're obsolete as a human being.
Your ability to function effectively in the 21st century is directly linked to your ability to increase your spot knowledge in wildly varied and often unanticipated areas quickly and efficiently. You must be able to find out. If you don't have the skills to find out, you will be left behind.
There's a lot of places you can go to get information, but the best place you can go is TV. I mean, you can learn about anything on TV. If you have cable, you can get like 2,000 channels.
Having skills enough to quickly access information is not enough.
You can learn all about animals, old music. You can learn about old music. You can even learn another language. They have sports and Spanish and Food Network.
This is information. Is it accurate? It has official looking numbers. It's on television.
And it had a lot of lights on it. It had the red.
This guy says it's real.
That's what it looked like with flying saucers.
One of the attendees was a woman who says she's 400 years old and from the planet Venus. Another woman says she was instructed by her space alien brothers to undergo breast implant surgery.
Facts are information. You know, like the sun sets in the west, that kind of thing.
Quite frankly, the cupboard has been more than half empty.
Opinions are information. But opinions aren't necessarily facts. Neither are deceptions or rumors. But they are all information. Now, this is the tricky part. How do you know these answers are correct? What makes them correct? This little picture? Who is behind these correct answers to everything? Could be. Could also be.
Anyone can put up a website and they can put any information, true or false, that they want at that site.
Let's say I had to do a report on Martin Luther King. Let's see what I come up with. This is the kind of thing that can happen if you're researching things on the internet. Lots of different websites. Whoa. Ah, look at this graphic right here. It looks like it was put up by a real organization. It seems pretty official. It has historical writings. It's the truth about Martin Luther King. Ah, it has recommended books, which is good because I can do some further research by reading those books. But what you find here is this website is not what it seems like in the inside. Looks pretty official, but this is a white supremacist website talking about white supremacy, but you never know that just by looking at the website. That's the thing.
It's information. The question is it what you're looking for? In reality, information is information. No more, no less. It's up to you to determine if it's good or bad, relevant or irrelevant, honest or deceptive. Whether you're a student, a teacher, a priest, a biologist, car mechanic, whatever you are or hope to be, there is information being generated right now that will modify or completely change everything upon which you base your knowledge of the world. Your job, your grade, your quality of life will depend to a large part on your information literacy.
Hopefully you're all awake now. And it can't be quite that funny, but now, so what is information literacy in terms that a high school student could understand even? It's knowing when you need information, being able to figure out, define the kind of information that you need for the problem or task at hand, being able to locate that information, evaluate it, and there we need big capital letters, evaluate, and use it effectively for the problem or issue at hand. That's pretty common sense, right? And it isn't something new. A lot of times we come up with these ideas in higher education, and it's like a fad, and it comes and goes and everything. Somebody gave me a copy of your campus newsletter, lamenting that your president did not mention liberal arts. No mention was made of liberal arts and humanities. If you go back to and think of what liberal arts means, historically, where it comes from heaven, obviously, right? The outcome of a humanities education has always been to prepare people for lifelong learning, that they'll be able to be effective in all phases of their life. So what we're talking about today is not a new concept. That's one of the myths that go around, and we're going to deal with some other myths later, but that this is a brand new thing and that it's an end in and of itself. Well, it clearly is not that. Information literacy and understanding it is a way of empowerment to do what you as faculty member and what you as a campus have always wanted to do, and that is to graduate students who have been successful in their academic studies and who will be successful in their lives, not only in their careers, but also in the quality of life that they have. We're not going to talk a lot about how this relates to quality of life today, but there's one issue about information literacy that I want to handle, and it falls best under that, and also something that I'm sure has touched all of your lives. People don't want any more information than they absolutely must have for what's before them. It's a commodity, but it's a commodity unlike all other ones, because all the other ones we want more of. Isn't having 3 suits better than having 1? How about having 2 cars instead of 1, or should I say 3 instead of 2? In most things, we want more rather than less, not information. People want just, and that's why Googling is so attractive. You just go on and something comes up there, you know. And you know what? A lot of it's really good. I mean, if you just want to know what's playing at the movies for the weekend and what time it are, you can't beat it. I mean, it's really fast. The one point at which people want all the information they can possibly get is what? Any guesses? What? I can't hear.
Illness.
Films. Illness. You got it. Prize goes to the lady with the pink top back there. When somebody in your family or you get a disease, an illness, you want to know everything you can about it. You want to know where the best doctors are. You want to know what kinds of medicines and what are the side effects. You can't get enough information. My husband and I are on the prayer network for our church, and it is remarkable week after week how many cases of cancer or relapses of cancer that are there. Heart too is in there, but mainly cancer. So there are people right around us here in Columbia who today are going to know they have something new to struggle with, and that's when they're going to want to know all the information. The Institute of Medicine estimates that half of adults in the United States are not comfortable and do not know how to deal with information. Now, if you've ever gotten, the sheet like this that goes with your new medicine, how many of you really read it? How many understand if you read it? I, by accident, once looked, because I'd since given up on that, and it said, do not take this medicine with grapefruit. Terrible things can happen to you. Well, I used to eat half a grapefruit every morning almost. So, and so there, again, it's part of this thing of just being so much information and in so many different places, and how do you know which is the right information, what's reliable? And so that's how information literacy is one area where quality of life is really important. I heard a woman, I was speaking with a director of the Library of Medicine, the U.S. Library of Medicine one time, and she said, there is no hope for having, health literate people, adults, if the schools don't pick up some of the responsibility to put the basics in place. That we can build on. So that's one of our challenges. However, what do you suppose is the issue in our country that drives most people's interest in information literacy? I've met several people from the business school here. It's business. When the people in economic development and business realized a long time ago that people had to be lifelong learners. That think of the companies that go in and out of business. Think of the information. Peter Drucker, in one of his articles, and he sometimes referred to it directly as information literacy, sometimes he inferred it. But in this case, he was talking about how businesses are good at taking internal information and figuring out, how to, make decisions based upon the internal information. But guess what? They're lousy at getting information from outside the walls of their business. And much of the information, as he pointed out, is public information that they can get their hands on, but they don't know how to do that. He called that like flying with one wing. How many of you would like to go up into a plane with only one wing? And then we wonder why, well, where do you think small business people get their information for that they need? Any guesses? Do they go to an attorney and to a banker and that sort of thing? No. They go to a friend. And now, if you are fortunate enough, and maybe you in a university are fortunate enough to have friends who are experts in all these fields, you may do all right. But the most people start small businesses, their friends don't know much more than they do. And then we wonder why so many small businesses fail. I want to show you just a picture from a report. This issue for the United States and for many other countries is economic development. And as recently as just under a year ago, October 16th of last year, there was a summit on information literacy on the American competitiveness in the internet age. And this was co-sponsored by the National Forum on Information Literacy, which is, as was mentioned earlier, an umbrella group of very broadly based organizations that are interested in it. And our co-sponsors included the U.S. Committee for Economic Development, Education Testing Service, and we'll talk more about them in a few minutes. And a new one, which was for me, the Institute for a Competitive Workforce. It's an affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Education Association. So what brings this kind of group together? And that is, we got to do better with what we've got if our country's going to go forward. And this is true, that's fine, we can turn it off. This is true even in oral-based society. I know you get students from around the world. The challenge is that if you're a person in another country who doesn't speak English, the amount of information that's available and the quantity of it, even if you are great going on the internet, drops significantly. So there's a real unbalance of information availability if you're not English speaking, and also just an amount of information that's up online. The forum has also been involved with 2 international meetings partnered with UNESCO, where the focus has been on not only developed countries like ours, but also the undeveloped countries. And in one of your handouts that you got, you have the Alexandria Proclamation, which from the most recent one, which was in 2005. And you'll see in there, that's it. Hold that up for a minute. Yeah. It's on the back side of that. It has those little things at the top. What you'll see is that they define information literacy, that it lies at the core of lifelong learning, and I'm jumping to another part, and is a basic human right in a digital world. Now, the interesting thing is many of these countries are working on developing national standards for the schools for students to master information literacy. That would never be a possibility in our own country. It's just too big. We don't do things like that at the national level. And so where you see most of the pressure coming for requiring information literate skills learning at the K through 12 level has to be done at the state level. And there are at least 14 states that have been documented as having that in their criteria for student learning outcomes. So there's hopes that maybe down the future the students that have come to you will have better skills in that area. But I would point out to you there are many places that don't have schools in their school libraries, or they have very inadequate ones, not ones that can give students the kind of basis they need. I called to find out what was going on in South Carolina and actually got the right person in the Department of Education. And yes, in their language arts area, there are standards that are being set. Apparently they just did a big reorganization in the Department of Education here in this state. It was hard to find anybody who knew how to find anybody there. And their web page is out of date. But this will be up, and there is an expectation that more will happen in the schools because this is a recent development here. But bottom line is that most of our graduates will not only see changes in their field, but they're going to have probably an average of 8 major job changes in their life because things are changing so rapidly. And what that means for those of you who care about the life of your students after they graduate is that they're going to have to retool long after they have you to lead them and guide them. And so the most precious thing you can give them, and Associate Provost talked about that, is not knowledge so much as the skills to keep up with knowledge and to go into new areas where they've never worked or studied before to learn for what they have to do to get that next job. And I was going to say, but it already was pointed out earlier, is how many of you would like to go to a doctor who hasn't learned anything since he graduated from med school 20 years ago? I don't think so. All right, so what's going on in our country to help that? We've already talked about some of the states are putting the requirements in crediting agencies. A couple of them have played a real leadership role with this, but you know, all of the regional crediting agencies all have moved and made a commitment to assessing student learning outcomes. You know, it'd be silly to assess anything at the University of South Carolina in terms, do you have enough money, do you have enough facility, I mean, the bean counting kinds of things as they call it. But is your campus making progress in student learning outcomes? And what is your strategy for it? What is it that you're doing? I was in California when this change took place there. Middle States Accrediting Agency has been a leader in this area going way back before it got on other people's radar screens. But rest assured that when you come up for accreditation, you know, actually your accrediting agency isn't quite as forward-looking as some of the others, but many are, because they frequently ask me to come as a consultant, how do we do something with information literacy before our accreditors show up? So this is one of the pressures that are on everybody now to move ahead. Another thing that has happened, and you have this brochure, hold the outside one up. No, sorry. That one right now in your hand. Oops, here, sorry, I should have got to pack it up here. This, the outside thing, the education testing services. There has been enough going on enough campuses that ETS decided that they needed to look into having a standardized test. And this was a very happy thing because unfortunately a lot of administrators, a lot of legislators only pay attention to test results. And when they see how low the reading is in the schools or something, then they do something about it. Well, we haven't had that kind of tool before. And this is a wonderful tool because it was developed with many campuses really involved with doing it. It's called ICT skills, which is information communication skills. And as you look through that, you will see two things. One is that it's not just talking about good use of technology, though that's essential today. But the harder part is that people use the evaluative skills when they're using the technology to get to information. And this test does a very good job. The first students who took it said it was unlike any other test they had. You really have to think to do it because you work through issues and problems there. And unfortunately, the results initially on those first ones are a bit discouraging about where students are. But we don't have standards yet. And I'm happy to say that after that summit that we announced at that, there is a blue ribbon committee that's now coming up with standards so that you can look at it and say, okay, we believe that when you graduate from high school, you should be at this level. Okay? And we believe, or you can say it the other way and say, when you come to college, that you should be at this level. And then there'll be other standards for where you should be, like when you begin your major work, your junior year or something, and when you graduate. So we will soon have that available. And for campuses who realize how important this is, you know, to bring this in. So, a number of campuses are already beginning to use it, at least in some programs or in all. So that gives me great hope that with this in here and when being able to test, you know, some places they even have faculty members just take the test. I'm not sure whether anybody analyzed them individually. I don't think they got it out, but they looked at a whole at where their faculty were. You know, it's not an easy thing as a faculty member. You know that old saying about, you know, academics, we learn more and more about less and less as we get, you know, focused, which we have to do for our research, right? Until we know everything about nothing. Well, that's not quite that bad, but the truth of the matter is most senior faculty members will have more trouble with information literacy skills if they're teaching a general ed course than they will in their field, because in their field they do know everything. So having this test can be very useful for a teaching learning center or for campuses to assess where they are and what needs to be done. I want to show you just a couple slides here. On the back side of this one, you have a bunch of definitions of information literacy, and I'll talk about that in just a minute if you want to pull that one out. Okay. Again, just to put this in perspective, to have an information literate citizenry require, to have our knowledge economy work well for us requires three things. And again, it's common sense if you think about it. First is that we have quality information available. Can't do anything well if you don't have that. So that's part of it. Next, you need to have universal access to that information. And our country, starting with the Clinton administration, has made enormous progress in making information online available to people. If you can't afford a computer, you can go to a public library and you can get that access. So we've made really good progress last couple of years with that. And then finally, that we have people that can use the technology and can evaluate the information. You know, it's even evaluating sometimes where to get the information. Sometimes you have to talk to a real live person. It's not all up on the internet. Sometimes you need to go to a government agency and get some information from them that isn't available online. So those are the 3 points. Now what I want to show you following up on that is how this works, okay? It's like a gap between the information haves and have-nots. And if you think about this, you can have the access, but if you don't have the other two, is it closed, the gap? And the unfortunate thing is that it's easy for politicians and for presidents of universities and other people when somebody comes in and say, we need this technology, we need this new computer, we need this upgrade thing because it's tangible. Start talking about information literacy, they fog over, you know. We've never done the kind of job we should have investing in our personnel. I think it's great that your faculty development office is going to be really start and get launched and everything. In businesses, most big businesses put a lot of money in human resources and upgrading and helping their staff to acquire better knowledge and better skills, because that's ultimately what makes our companies work. But we're not as good on that. But if we just have the internet access, you can see those other 2 parts come out and we've got a hole we're going to fall into, right? Same thing with a quality information program. You can have those 2 things and it still doesn't work. We have to have also the people who learn from you or through learning experiences that you create for them, how to use the access and the information. Thank you. And then this is sort of my favorite one. It was in a Change magazine article that I wrote one time. because it sort of says it all. I mean, information literacy, there are so many, and this is on that paper that you have, so many different literacies. Health literacy we talked about already, computer literacy, media literacy, visual literacy. We've got faculty members in media literacy. We have faculty members who really focus on media literacy or focus on visual literacy or whatever. But of course it starts with a handle, and that is we don't have students coming who can read well. None of this stuff really works for them. But if you've got that and you put all those other things together, we've got information literacy. It's the encompassing terms for all these other literacies. And if you notice what's at the top, critical thinking. Okay, I have a question for you. Can you teach critical thinking and avoid information literacy? Is that possible? Yes, no? Okay, you're not sure. Either that or you've already gone to sleep on me. One time in San Jose, we had people come from a prestigious university in our neck of the woods. And they were at this university, they had a separate business library, a school, a whole new building, major program in business. And they had their own library, but nobody was coming into it. And so they were going to be able to remodel it, and they came to advice for us because we had this brand new lifelong learning library from, pre-kindergarten all the way through graduate school library, and people were pouring in. And they wanted to learn for us how they could attract people into their business library. And I said, well, that's easy. I said, the single most important thing is the assignments that your faculty give. And they said, oh no, our whole school is based on case studies. There's never any need for the students to come in the library. Now, I will admit, on a resume, if somebody from that program was up for a job, they'd probably get more attention than somebody that was graduating from San Jose State University in business because of the prestige of this nameless institution. But in the long run, who's going to be the more valuable employee? Because once you graduate, nobody pulls the information together for your case study so that you can be sure of the information. So that's why you can teach critical skills and not get the information literacy. Now the flip side of that, can you teach information literacy without getting into critical thinking skills? You're sure on this one? Absolutely not. I mean, the first National Report on Information Literacy was in 1989, and they defined information literacy just as we've done today in simple terms or fancier ways to describe it. But if they were to do that report over today, the one thing I think would change, and I chaired that committee, is that evaluate information would have been in big capital letters, because it's so changed, and that's fine. Thank you, Molly, so much. Now, some of you are old enough that you may be around my age. Not many of you. Most of you look much younger than I. But do you remember back when you were working on your doctoral dissertation and your problem was finding enough information? There was so little of it available. It's all changed. I was talking to a group of students one time, and I said, now it's different from you. You go in and you click on something, you immediately see 300 citations, and then you look to see what ones are in your library, and that's what you do. And they said, oh no, that's not what we do. And I said, it's not? They said, no, first we look for the shortest things on the printout, and then we go find which one our libraries have. So again, it's that information overload thing, and possibility that we have to deal with today. Okay, I'm going to just stop there for a minute because I'm about ready to go into more practical kind of stuff. And just to ask, is there any questions somebody wants to ask right now? Oh, good. Then let's get down to what do we do about all of this? Okay, I'm going to start with, can I also assume, and this time I would like everybody to shake their head, that you so far think this is something you should pay attention to for your students? Yes or no? Thank you. Okay. I'm going to start with 3 myths. about information literacy, that unless these are understood, you're going to have a rough time coming up with something you'll be happy with. The first one is assuming that your students have basic research skills when they come to you. Research skills that incorporate using the technology to get the information, evaluative kind of thing. They don't. And the situation, unfortunately, is getting worse. Part of it is, again, when there's a budget cut, and dear governors of California are very good at this, I'm not sure yet about here, if there is a budget cut in education, one of the first things to go is the library. Or they throw out the librarian, who's the one that can work with the teachers, and just have an aide there who checks books in and out. So that's one reason why it's not happening. Other thing is, with the concern for writing skills at the K through 12 level, more and more high schools don't require research papers anymore. It's narrative writing that is required because the emphasis on those national tests are writing skills. So you can, they can maybe write pretty well in general, but maybe what they're writing about doesn't have any basis in any kind of reality at all. Or it can be a story about how I went to the beach last summer or something like that. So the schools, because of the pressures on them to bring up writing scores, that's another reason why developing research skills is not working well in our schools. Now, there are many, many school-level people who are passionate about information literacy. There are national standards both at the academic and at the school levels on information literacy. Clearly, from what this woman said, there's going to be more and more of it up here on their webpage in South Carolina. So it isn't, but again, if you have a principal or a school superintendent who never had a school library, which is quite possible, very hard for them to understand why they should invest money in that when what parents and lobbying groups are for is less kids in the schoolroom. That's the priority. Anything that's not in the classroom and keeping those class sizes down, they go by the board. And I've met some people from music and art, and frequently they go by the board too. So we need to assume that let's remember our international students too. Many of them come from places where there's not even a public library, and they certainly didn't have any in their schools. So you're safer in assuming that your students don't have these skills than you are in thinking, well, most of them must have it, and I don't have enough time to babysit these other ones and bring their skills up. Okay, another myth in this area is, well, we've always done that. We've been doing that for years. I've taught this course. I've always had the librarian come in one of my first classes in the fall and tell my students the information they're going to need to do their term paper. This is nothing new. It's just a whole new name, another bandwagon thing to get on board with. Not true. What we used to call information literacy or bibliographic instruction was basically showing students here, this is a reference book for this. Now it's showing them the things on the computer. But the process of thinking through the kind of information, let me ask you this. Those of you who give term papers, and you put it in your syllabus, that this is a portion of the grade, it's going to be due on the last week of class, right? And you bring the librarian in, or whoever, or you maybe even have them go to the library and have the librarian talk to them then. When do you think your students start to work on that term paper? They're human. And most of them have a lot of responsibilities even beyond their academic ones. They may have jobs, they may have family. And most of them are going to start to work on their papers. One faculty member said, well, the really good ones start 2 weeks before it's due. Do you think they remember anything that they were told that first or second week of class when you had the librarian in? No. So that doesn't work. But in a little bit, we're going to talk about how we can make it work. So again, it's not the same because before it was just teaching or trying to get students to understand that these tools existed. Now we're talking about, again, their learning outcomes. What is it? Do they know when they need information? Do they know what kind of information? Are they going? Can they identify and find it? I mean, if they're on a humanities database and they're looking for something about engineering, they'll find something. They will. If you Google, you're going to find something. And if you go in a database for a subject area, just because it hasn't been there, They'll probably find something, but is it what they want or need or you want them to have in their paper? The other major myth about information literacy is that it is a library issue. Now we've got, where's Tom? We have a head honcho from the library here. We have a number of librarians. There should be about one on every table. But notice that they are greatly outnumbered by the classroom faculty members that are here. And that's the only way to do it. It's a learning issue. It's a student learning outcome issue. And because of that, it is of concern to all of us. And then, which takes me now into some facts about information literacy, a sort of transition thing, and that is the leadership for this has to come from the classroom faculty members. Your students really, you know, and I may be stepping on toes here, and forgive me, but some campuses, in trying to meet this needs, have created standalone information literacy or library courses, or what they call it, for students. Well, what's wrong with that? First thing is that how many students are going to elect to take that when there's all the pressure for all the general ed they have to cover and all the stuff for their major that they want to do and everything. So very few students are going to take it unless they need a couple extra credits and they have a slot in their schedule free at that time. Okay, then that might work. So unless you as faculty member put this in your syllabus and build in the kinds of assignments that will require students to pay attention, you know, so it's both modeling that you think it's important, and secondly, setting up assignments that they can't wiggle out of, like the term paper. Let's take the term paper for a minute. What could you do that wouldn't take up more class time to make sure your students learn something about the literature? Well, let's say you put that in your syllabus to begin with, okay? And the students know what their paper due, but you have a timeline in there that by a certain point, well, first of all the nitty-gritty about using the library, how to use the basic tools and that sort of thing, on many campuses now is done by self-paced computer modules, because again, that's where you can level the playing field. You will have some students that know all this stuff, they can whiz through it. The ones that don't know it, they don't have to be embarrassed, but they can keep going at it until they get a passing grade on it. It grades it all. Faculty members gets the grades that their students give. And you require, the first thing is that you require by this point in time that all the students have successfully passed the 3 or 4 modules. A lot of campuses have added a 4th module, which is plagiarism. That's a big, big issue on our campus today. And some of it is done because students don't know what they're doing. And then there are other reasons, but we also let them know how they're going to get caught, and so that they don't do it for the other reasons. But anyway, you have 3 to 4 basic modules. Students do it on their own time. And then you have a date when they have to come in with a suggestion for what they want their topic to be. That gets approved. You have another date by which they have to have an annotated bibliography for their paper. And sometimes the librarian helps in evaluating that. Sometimes the faculty member is comfortable to do that all by themselves. But you know at that point whether they've done good research in the kinds of places that you want them to do. And then they have so long before they get a first draft in, and this is where the writing across the curriculum people get involved, is that it's checked. Is it logic to it? And most of the time the faculty member does this too. Is there logic for it? Does it look like they're using information correctly to back up? Are they missing information someplace? And then, of course, the final paper. But by putting these things, and none of these things take place in the classroom except one time, and that's after when the students have tried to come up with annotated bibliography and they know what they couldn't find and they're struggling. That's where you move that one session from the librarian with them, because then they know that they don't know and they are interested. So if you have a sequence like that, you still have only one class time taken to do this, just the old way. But you can guarantee that your students are going to pick up some really good basic skills about how to do this in their other classes and ultimately how to do it in the real world. But remember, do not allow any wiggle room. They'll find a way around you if you do. The second fact about information literacy is that partnerships are essential. Everybody here, I think, has some small feeling. I was just talking to a faculty member who is up for their 3rd year review right now. That person has to do that on top of their teaching, their advising, their research. They probably also need to be on a couple committees to have that in their portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. Legislators have never understood how you all get paid so much for so few hours in the classroom, but we know why, because you are working far more outside the classroom than you are in. So who are you going to partner with? Obviously, one person is the subject specialist in the library or your area. You want that person, especially if you're coming up for promotion or tenure or you're just starting your career here, you want to know that person really well, because that person can help you find stuff that's going to help you with your own research, and new things that come out alert you to that, as well as working with you to figure out how to set up assignments that make sense for your course at the level it is and within keeping with the learning outcomes you want for your students. But you also want to partner with a lot of other faculty members on campus. And I know some of you are on a lifelong learning study committee for the campus. Yes, hands up. Where are you? Oh, okay. And you have a you have a general ed program study that's going on now, I think. Yes, yes, you do. And you have something like University 101, because I saw the sign outside. One of the things you want to do, because information literacy is not an end in itself, but it's means to an end, at each one of these things where your campus is concerned about making progress with student learning, to say, how does information literacy help facilitate this? Where does it fit in with having students be at this learning point, you know, when they go through this experience? Campus, it's a window of opportunity, because what you need to do is have a scheme, a plan for how you do this. If every faculty member does just what they think, you know, in terms of a term paper or project or something like that, and it's not connected to anything, and we don't look at the general ed first couple years programs, some students are going to hear the same basic thing 3 or 4 times in that 1 hour, and some students aren't going to hear anything. This sounds very sad, but this is true. At a university I was at, a librarian came in with tears in her eye and handed me paper. She said, read this. It was in Professor so-and-so phys ed course. And I know we have somebody here from phys ed too. And this student had been required to reflect back upon the paper that they were required to do in phys ed about the life of a famous athlete. And this student said, I never had to do a paper before. I never had to do research. I didn't know all these things were there in the library. And now I'm leaving, and this is pretty much a direct quote because it's so pathetic and yet heartwarming in a way. I'm leaving the university with sadness that of all the other things I could have learned while I was here. Now, that's an extreme case, and I know it doesn't happen to many, but again, it needs to be coordinated. If you're going to have critical thinking skills built in, if you're going to have writing skills built in, look how the information literacy fits with that. You should probably have on every one of these committees, if you don't, a librarian who you could say, go back and do some work for us and figure out how we can do this best. They, however, are overworked too, but for that they would go away happy with work. So looking where information literacy fits in your general ed requirements, your undergraduate research, that's another natural. How can you teach students to be good researchers if they don't know how to find the best information for what they're doing? Freshman year experience, learning communities, all of these things that many campuses are doing to try to enhance undergraduate learning all have a place for information literacy in them. And so you don't want to start with information literacy. You want to start here with what you want for your students and then find out how information literacy can help you accomplish that. Then we get to the disciplines. We all know, even if we haven't really looked closely at it, how different the literature is for biology than for art, right? Art's one of the few places where faculty still want some books. Most of the rest of the faculty don't want to be bothered with, and students don't want to be bothered with anything they can't get online. So it's very, very different. I'm going to describe for you a model of what a number of campuses have done, and I'll base this upon how we got started at San Jose State University when I was there. We did what we talked about earlier. We had the modules for the students to learn. Actually, we also used that as a recruiting tool. I don't know if you're recruiting for undergraduates, but when students were accepted, in San Jose there are a lot of universities right around there, and students tend to apply to all of them and see the best deal they get. When our admissions office would send out a letter saying, oh, we're so glad you've been accepted and look forward to coming fall, knowing full well that they're still, you know, trying to make up their mind. There's a letter that went in from the head of the library that said, we really care about you and we're here to help you be successful as a student. And to get a head start, here's this online module that you can take, you know, from your home or your school library to see how you are with your research skills. So it's one of those Reader's Digest kind of test things, but it asks some basic questions and then it rates a student. And they either say, you need to do a little more work before you get there, you know, or it says, you're okay, but you're going to need to learn more when you get there, or saying, you're in wonderful shape. Now what that shows mothers and students is we cared enough to make sure that they were going to be getting the skills that they needed. Also introduced the term information literacy in library way up front before they even came. So information literacy can even help for student recruitment and things like that. However, getting back to this disciplines, there are national standards for information literacy. They're out by the Association of College and Research Libraries. And so in many of the programs, and by now they may be in all of them, I don't know, the dean sets up a committee that's charged to take the leadership with this, the subject discipline librarians involved, and they start by looking at those national standards and saying, well, these, you know, number 1, number 3, number 4, number 5 are really important in our field, but not number 2. We don't want to be bothered with it. So they eliminate that. And then they go back and they rewrite the standards that are important for their field in their language. Then they get approval from their faculty members of that, and then they go ahead and they say, okay, you know, make a grid. Here are the ones we want. Here are the courses where we're going to introduce this one concept. Here is where we're going to reinforce it, and here's when we're going to have a culminating experience using on that one skill area. And they really map it out on their curriculum and match. So not every faculty member is concentrating on one of those skills areas, but they all get covered in a logical kind of fashion. Again, it's not the sort of thing that in terms of time in the classroom takes that much different, but students know when they're in Professor so-and-so class that the focus is going to be on critical thinking, information evaluating kind of thing. Another one might be on how to find the right information. And students know that they're expected to learn. It's just like the subject contact. They get some of their grade done with that. And again, it's efficient. Students aren't getting repeated things on the same topic from their faculty as moving on. And it works. That's the wonderful thing about it, is that it works. So so the importance of looking at overall integration into the curriculum to make sure everybody gets what they need and it's done the most efficient way on faculty time is pretty much it. The good news, which is also a fact, is that there is a ton of literature out there. There are best cases or showcase best practice sites. You can find in pretty much, I would think by now, every discipline, articles co-written by faculty members or written by faculty members or written by librarians on how they've done information literacy within different disciplines. So you don't have to start from scratch. If you want to move ahead with this, again, your friendly librarian should be able to help you quickly find examples close to what you're doing, and or identifying faculty members on your campus, including your sister campuses, who are already doing a bang-up job of this. And so you have a lot you can learn from each other. Within the California State University system, we did that. Our chancellor's office started years ago making some money available as grants for faculty members and librarians teams that would develop information literacy within particular courses. And then after they did that for a number of years, we would have a program for all the sciences to come in with the faculty members and the librarians and go, that others could learn from them that hadn't done hadn't gotten a grant. So you don't have to start from scratch. You don't want to start from scratch. Again, your time is too valuable, too precious. So what you need to do is just to find some good examples of what's working and then make it yours, improve it and make it yours and make it just right for the University of South Carolina. Now I'm going to stop there and hopefully we have a little questions. Yeah.
I'm curious about the user modified sources like Wikipedia, because the students these days, I know when I ask them to find information, a lot of them are using that as a source, and I don't see that going away anytime soon, and I think students are using it. I know my colleagues' children in school, they mentioned that they use that for their research papers, for their classes, in like high school or in middle school. So,
yeah, I will. The question is things like Wikipedia, which everybody's using, and how does that fit into all this? Well, think back before we had all this. And we had magazines like Good Housekeeping, what's one of the world, the scandal newspapers. The Inquirer, that's it, that's the one I was looking for. And then some night Time magazine, Newsweek, New York Times. So even back then there were a range of things. Would you be happy with if the only sources were cited was even the Britannica Encyclopedia? So part of it is just the same as it's always been. There's good information and there's bad information. Wikipedia does pretty good in some areas like science and math. It is not that good in other areas. And again, it's like any other encyclopedia. It's just the beginning level kind of thing. So is it always going to be there? Are people going to use it? Absolutely. The question is, are your students going to know that that's not enough and they need to go farther than that? Does it help a little bit of help? And they do have some policing done on it, but the professors who worked on it at the beginning have walked away from it and setting up a competitive one. Now, that could be just because they don't like to think that anybody could know more than they do about something. But I think part of it is just a genuine concern of the quality. But they will be putting out another online encyclopedia. There were some questions back. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the term critical thinking sometimes through here, but that hasn't really been defined. I'm wondering if you might elaborate on that a little bit. And also, I've been using these little things from the foundation for critical thinking. I'm wondering if you're familiar with that and might comment on that.
Yeah, I don't know that particular, but if I were still chair of the National Forum on Information Literacy, that organization is one that I would go after and say, why don't you join? And let's interact more. Again, you cannot separate information literacy from critical thinking. Again, just to be careful that a student can come up with a logical paper, but if that critical thinking wasn't applied wisely to the information resources, the flow, the logic may be there, but it may still come up with the wrong answer. Do you know, one of the things when I was at Wayne State, we had probably something like a University 101 course that every freshman had to take, and they hated it. And faculty members were forced to teach it. Now, what made it politically a little more challenging was there was a handful of faculty members who loved it, and their students adored them and thought it was the most wonderful course in the whole world. Everybody else hated it. And so we were just putting up a new undergraduate library, and when I was hired, the president asked if I would take on responsibility for redoing that, not telling me what a political hot potato it was. But since I love students, it seemed like a logical thing to do. And I worked with, we had focus groups with faculty and with students who took it. We brought in consultants on what would help freshmen, particularly at-risk freshmen in that regard. Did a lot of things. And we ended up on adopting a debate format. You know, the one thing besides getting the grade you want from your professor is not looking bad in front of your fellow students. Okay. Now, when it's a term paper and shown at the end, nobody in your class knows what you got, right? You passed a course, that's all that matters, hopefully with the grade that you wanted. But in a debate, in a team debate, when you know that other people in your class are doing all this research to show you up, that you're not, your position is not good, that's a big motivator for students. That course ended up being a very happy course for everybody. And again, we had a professor who was very good in teaching debate. And students were motivated because they want to look good in front of their fellow students. That got sidetracked a bit much, but again, that goes back to the critical thinking. They were thinking not only, what they needed to make their case, but also critical thinking what kind of opposition information was coming in, which is very good. Yes, sir.
We have some opposition, I think, from some faculty members actually in training the tools that you need to get in and use these different technologies that are out there or the information that's available. For instance, just basic words.
Could you talk a little bit louder, because I don't think
okay.
Or maybe
just teaching tools in universities. I think we run into some opposition. A lot of it's political because we only have so many hours we can allocate to a particular major or whatever. But also, our students need these things. Now, the assumption by many faculty is that they're getting the training in high school on Word, Excel, and all that sort of stuff. When in actuality, if you were to test them, you'd find out that was not necessarily the case. Do you have any opinions on that, or do you see any direction? I know the library would appreciate it, I'm sure, if people knew how to do footnotes and things like that. They didn't have to train each student that came in. But those types of things that are it may be tools oriented, but yet they're tools that people should have by the time they reach the university level.
To simplify the question greatly, the question was students coming that don't have technology skills like how to do Excel sheets, how to do footnotes online, and other things like that. And there really is no good answer. Yes, students should have those skills. When, again, you look at the really, like the ETS thing, you'll see some of those skills, included in that. But it's sort of like the information literacy. You can, assume all you want that students have those skills when they come here, but most of them don't. There's not an easy answer for that one, I'm sorry to say. Certainly the footnote parts would get caught up more closely with the information literacy. Other comments or questions? Yes. Would you stand and project? Thank you.
I'll pretend I'm teaching. I'm afraid this may be a question more for the librarians here, but it sounds like what we want to develop is something that will happen in the general ed courses, and then we can move on into what we're teaching our majors in our own departments. And my question is, how are we going to find out what they're learning in the general ed classes so we can modify our major courses to build on those? Have a plan for that?
Somebody from the university has to answer that one. Jed, do you have any?
Well, I'm on one of the general education courses, task forces. Okay, and I think that request should be considered by the task forces as they're developing their recommendations for that. My task force hasn't talked about how we're going to share what we're doing yet. We're still trying to figure out what. Thank you.
Redoing the general ed comes up on every campus every so many years, and a couple of us were talking about it over here. And it needs to, but it's always a very difficult thing because of the politics involved and how programs are funded. But when you're doing it, you want to do it really well, get it out to everybody and have it working, because maybe you can stay with it a little bit longer than the ones that are more hastily done.
I had another thought that was sort of a follow-up. The purpose of the revising of the general education requirements, as I understand it, is to make them outcomes-based. So it'll say, rather than you shall have English 101 and 102, it says that after completing English 101 or 2 with the third grade, the student will have these particular skills. Okay, and so some of that will be articulated in the general education requirements themselves, what you can expect them to be able to do. I kind of doubt it will get down to the level of they shall have this particular software package knowledge or anything like that. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am?
How does this tie into the possibility of using competency testing at the end of, I don't know, at the end of educational experience or at the end of the freshman year? Does competency testing fulfill this requirement for outcomes-based?
Certainly, if that's the way your campus is going, we now have the tools that you could test where they're at. What you want to do is have your assessment process to mirror whatever your campus priority is. Some campuses are very much into portfolio for students and evaluation on that. Then you have different records as students go along at how well their information literacy and their writing, their speaking skills go. And I'm not sure I've answered your question. Is the
question perhaps, are there competency testing type strategies for the topic that we were discussing this morning?
And is that a useful thing in your
and are they useful for this topic?
Yeah, I think again those self-paced modules at the beginning, that's very much let students know as well as their teachers what their skills are and how they're improving. The ET, yeah, you can do that at the beginning. If you're not sure, I mean, at this point, if you're teaching an upper division course, you can't be sure they've had anything, so you might want to, make sure they've had it, or just require the students in your class who haven't passed the modules, a year or two earlier, then to assign them, because again, they could go do that on themselves. If you have a student who really isn't doing well with research, and most of the other people in the class you don't want to waste class time trying to educate that one student. That's when you want to assign that student to go and do it. The education, the ETS ICT skills thing, again, is something that can be used as part of a campus strategy, maybe around the junior. In the book and incidentally, I didn't do that book all by myself. Gordon Gee, who's back to Ohio State after being at Brown and Vanderbilt, co-authored it with me. And he got interested in information literacy because of his law background. The way he described it is he said there are two types of law schools. There's the black letter law schools, which teach students to memorize key statutes. And he said, and then there are the good law schools that teach students how to think and find information. And so, again, coming from a law background, never having even heard the term information literacy, light bulb went off for him fairly quickly. But we need more, and again, there are a lot of other tools for assessing things that are out in the literature that, if you have a particular need, again, I'd get together with the liaison librarian and, have him or her help you find out what works for your class. Other comments, questions?
In your experience at universities, how much can you require of students outside the credit hour? I mean, so let's say every semester we wanted every student on campus to complete a module on this online that they could work self-paced, but by the end of the semester, in order to get grades reported, they had to show that they had gone through it and met some minimum, and we just had them do that every semester, but it wasn't a credit hour course, it wasn't is that allowed?
No.
I don't really know. I mean, and then if it's not allowed, how does it fit into these curricula, which are already very full, with not a lot of extra space? And you mentioned about, when they're a junior, make them go back and take these modules. Well, how do you make them go back and take the modules?
Well, if a student is going to have, the question is, how much can you require students to do outside of the classroom? And I hope, I obviously have not made it clear that it has to be tied into the classrooms.
Just as part of every course.
Yeah, well, whatever your course needs. And again, if within your discipline, as you map out what are those information literacy skills you want your students to be competent in by the time they graduate with your, standing behind that degree. Then you figure out which courses in your discipline should do what. So it won't be every professor expecting the same thing out of their students. You want to be very specific about covering those things that you want in a logical kind of way in your curriculum. So just like I assume most of you have your students need to do some writing or reading and stuff as part of their coursework, you can assign within that them to do an online module. So again, looking at what makes sense.
But if that's something the university wants to stress, there needs to be some way for the university to require or
right.
I mean, if the university wants that to be something that all their students will have, information literacy, they can't just leave it up to the individual department alone because they
right. Again, I think, yeah. And I've never been on a campus where faculty wanted the administration to tell them what to do when they're teaching. So that won't work. But again, as you have your general ed courses, as you have these other groups up that are looking at the overall of that basic knowledge that you want all your students to have, there's where some things should be built in. And I'm sure with Jed involved with this one committee, it will be done very well. I'll take this question and then I want to close with something because I have something from my heart that I want to say, and I know a bunch of you have to leave to teach and stuff before too long.
Hi, I'm Katrina Bogovich. I'm out of the School of Medicine at OBGYN. And so I have more of a comment for all the faculty here who deal a lot with the undergraduate students. I actually have a PhD in chemistry, so I've dealt with many undergraduate students as a TA and a TF. So I understand what you deal with every day with students. My comment is that if you're not concerned about this informational competence, which I think you have to be, it's a foundational part of education. You can't live without it. I put myself through college by starting in high school working as a page at Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh. I went to Carnegie Library, Carnegie Mellon University, so I'm saying Carnegie properly, in case you don't know. That's a part of your information literacy today. But the point is, we get students in who just barely understand whether or not they really want to be MDs. We actually have students who go through 4 years of medical school and quit medicine. Their object is to get the MD because if they don't, when they find out in their third year, when they start doing clinical stuff, they find out they don't want any part of this, but now they have a psychological tie-in. If they had been taught through high school, possibly, because that's when I started my education and information, all the way through college, to look at things slightly differently and not to be so focused in high school, but to look at things and say, if I'm a biologist, I don't just have to go, my only options are not to go into industry or to go into medicine. I can be a forest ranger, I can help in ecology, I can do all sorts of things. There are so many more things, and they don't get that because they're not competent in the ability to do research, even at the basic level of understanding what their purpose in life is.
Yeah, that gets more on the quality of life side, which, again, I've done very short shrift on today because...
But the point is, for those faculty who question, how are we going to do this? The simple answer I can see is you go to other schools who are already doing it, and you learn from them. You have to be competent in your skills to find the people in your field who are already doing this with your students. That's your responsibility as a university faculty member, because you're sending those students to us at the School of Medicine, and those kids have so much information to ingest as medical students that they have, to the extreme, only give me the information I need, and we get dinged by the students if we try to help them think beyond that. So the point is that they need to be able to welcome learning as an experience to broaden their horizons. And we all have to be willing to go outside of ourselves and say, you know, this impacts my students. And that student is going to become a medical student, possibly, who has no skills in doing research, and you can't force them to with the restrictions they have on work weeks. They become residents. And next July, if you get sick and go to the hospital and you meet a student that you did not help to become information literate as a new resident in the hospital, you only have yourself to blame for what happens to you as an outcome, information outcome, when you're in the hospital.
Well, thanks very much for that very practical thing. People who I will say, if you get involved with this, my experience is most faculty members who do it and work it out over a period of time become ardent supporters of it because they see the difference in their students. One of the first people that faculty members to get involved with information literacy when I was in Colorado was a chemistry faculty member, and he team taught a course with a librarian. And he said to me one time, you know the most important thing that my students learned from this course? And I said, what was that? He said, they saw the librarian learning from me and me learning from the librarian. Okay, so, when the light bulb goes off for kids and they feel in control of it, and whether it's a debate or whether it's a paper that just comes together right or what it is, it's a very happy thing. So I want to take it back in history now. I know I don't have a lot of time, but again, I wouldn't normally do this until after lunch, except I know a number of you want to go out and teach. Years ago, incidentally, when I get all these nice introductions, they forget to tell the real truth, like it took me 10 years to get my BA. I'm a very late bloomer. But during that time, I worked in a public library on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And back in those days, the children were whatever they were really it. I mean, the Jewish children were Orthodox. I can still remember the face of a little Chinese girl who was so beautiful and so shy that I had to guess what she wanted. She couldn't bring herself to say something to me. And these were kids, by and large, who had come through Ellis Island. Excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself. I knew I was making a difference in their lives. And then I found all these photographs of children, black and white photographs, children literally lined up for blocks waiting for the doors of that public library to open. They were back from when the immigrants were coming in through Ellis Island. And these were children that knew that their future depended on getting to information, and they were, waiting for, and that did something in my heart. And it just sort of nestled there a bit while I wasn't finishing my college and doing some other things. And then I was in fundraising. I kept thinking back to those pictures and those children, and I thought, that's a business I want to be in. I want to be in the business of getting children to information so that they can have better futures for them and for their families. That's what I want to do. And at that time, the only way I knew how to do that was it had to have something to do with the library, because that's where I found out about it. And so that's why I then finished my bachelor's degree and went on to get my master's and doctorate. All the years, I've kept one of those photographs. I don't have, in my library office. So on days when I have to go from one committee meeting to another or something else that just, I'd look at that picture and say, I'm doing all of this because of this. But that's what we're involved with here. We're really talking about how to provide better futures for our students and for their families. And maybe not all of many of your students may come from more affluent backgrounds and that sort of thing, but it's for everybody. But in my heart, it's always especially for those students that are just a little bit at risk, because they're the ones that are lacking this kind of survival skills from the very basic level. And as we help them, we also help the people, we help everybody, because if their future isn't better, then none of our futures would be good. I've got grandkids now I've got to worry about. What's the future going to be like for them? Are they going to be able to cope with it well? Certainly hope so with their grandmother around. But if there are too many kids that don't make it, either in high school or don't make it in college, because they don't have the basic skills that they need, then the future for my grandchildren doesn't look very good to me. So I'm going to ask you to do something now, all right? And I want you to be honest. But if just based upon, even before you've had your discussion, you think that information literacy abilities are important to people's future, would you then commit to doing just one thing next week that you wouldn't have done if you hadn't been here? Just one thing. All right. I'd really like a show of hands.